Let me tell you a story, because if you've spent any time around real estate, you've either lived this story yourself or you know someone who has. I've met so many people who said, I read a real estate book, watched a few videos, and decided I was going to be an investor. They bought a house, felt like they finally made it, and then quietly lost a ton of money. After that, you never hear from them again. It happens way more often than people like to admit. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Mistakes are part of the game. They're unavoidable. What separates the people who succeed from the people who disappear isn't whether they make mistakes. It's whether they understand the game well enough to survive them. I've seen investors quit when they were so close to getting it right. One bad deal, one surprise repair, one scary month, and they decided real estate wasn't for them. That's wild when you consider how many wealthy people build their first real momentum through real estate. When I look back at my own journey, I didn't suddenly become successful because of one perfect deal. I got better because I learned what not to do. One of the first lessons that really hit me was this: excitement will bankrupt you if it isn't backed by math. Real estate is a numbers game whether you like it or not. You don't win because a house feels right. You win because the deal makes sense on paper. Return on investment became my anchor. Every deal had to answer one simple question. If I put money into this, how much am I getting back? And how fast? If I couldn't clearly see strong returns, I walked away. I didn't care how nice the house looked or how excited I felt. Having that standard alone saved me from deals that would have quietly drained me over time. Cash flow mattered just as much. A property barely breaking even might look fine on a spreadsheet. But in real life, it's stressful. One vacancy, one repair, one surprise bill, and suddenly you're feeding the property every month. I learned very quickly that positive cash flow isn't a bonus, it's protection. Then there's location. People love to repeat location, location, location. But they don't always understand it. Some markets grow, some stall, some slowly decline. Buying without understanding the direction of the market is like sailing without checking the weather. You might move for a while, but eventually the storm catches up. Another big lesson came from debt. Leverage can be powerful, but it cuts both ways. I've watched investors stretch themselves just because a bank said yes. Just because you can qualify for a loan doesn't mean you should take it. When your margins are thin, every little problem becomes a big problem. Buying too much house for the market is a common mistake. Affordable homes tend to have more demand, more flexibility, and more exit options. When investors overextend themselves, they leave no room for error. And real estate will always test you. A huge number of investors lose properties simply because they bought more than they could realistically support. One thing that really changed how I invest was always knowing the exit. Before I ever bought the property, I never go in blindly. I already know how long I'm willing to hold, what needs to happen for me to sell, and what the next move looks like afterward. Markets move in cycles. They always have. Investors who don't plan for downturns often get forced to sell at the worst possible time. That's not bad luck. That's bad planning. I learned to buy with enough margin that even when the market softened, I wasn't panicking. Then there are costs, the sneaky ones, that don't show up on your initial budget. I still remember my first entry-level property. I thought I had everything figured out. Paint, flooring, basic updates, simple. What I didn't know was that underground, there was a sewer line issue waiting for me. That one surprise alone cost thousands more than I planned. It didn't destroy the deal, but it taught me a lesson I never forgot. Optimism is expensive in real estate. Conservatism keeps you alive. Repairs cost more than you think. Vacancies last longer than you expect. Not every property rents instantly. If you don't prepare for those realities, you end up stressed, reactive, and making bad decisions just to stay afloat. Having reserves isn't optional if you want to stay in the game long term. And finally, the most dangerous mistake I see: emotional investing. This is where logic walks out the door. People fall in love with countertops, paint colors, and imagine futures instead of falling in love with returns. Once emotions take over, standards disappear. Investors overpay, they over-renovate, they justify decisions they would never make if they were purely looking at the numbers. Real estate doesn't reward emotion, it rewards discipline. The best investors I know treat properties like assets, not dreams. When you make decisions based on data instead of feelings, everything gets clearer. You move slower, but you move smarter. If there's one thread tying all of this together, it's this: real estate isn't about being perfect, it's about being prepared. Learn the numbers, respect debt, plan your exit, assume costs will be higher than expected, and keep your emotions out of the deal. Do that. And instead of becoming another cautionary story, you give yourself a real shot at building something that lasts.